if any of these candidates that have been floated around for USC are really that amazing. Like the days of Jim Harbaugh or, Scott Frost or Urban Meyer falling out of the sky, it's not there right now. I'm not saying that those all work.
Okay, only one of those guys ultimately worked out at the place they went.
No, but I'm not saying, but there's no slam dunk who's going to come out of the woodwork, take over the USC job. And it's like, I would have questions about Luke Fickell there. I would have questions about James Franklin there. These aren't no doubt about it candidates. And it's like for a job that in our poll that we did, top 5 jobs in America, by talking to 100 college football staffers across the country, USC was a very desirable job. And it's just like, I don't know where was USC? Where did it finish? It was number 6, right? Yeah, 6. So if it's the 6th best job in college football, I don't know if James Franklin really gets my blood going.
Doesn't James Franklin have like the 8th best job in college football already? So
he does. I feel like Penn State is. I think it received votes, but it wasn't in the top 12 of the poll. But still, great job, top 15 job in America. But I also think James Franklin might rather live in LA and might rather start his clock over.
I think he starts his clock over, exactly. You get away from Ohio State. You have to deal with Oregon. But I would argue that Ohio State has been more consistent and more dominant for longer, so Oregon does not feel as scary. And you have the geographical advantage over Oregon, whereas at Penn State you don't necessarily have a geographical advantage over Ohio State. You guys you're kind of even with them geographically in terms of recruiting. So I do think that would be attractive. I think James Franklin would play well in LA. I think the way he recruits, the way he talks, the way he coaches, the kind of players he's looking for, I think that would fit very well at USC. So that's why his name keeps coming up. Every time Clay Helton went on the hot seat, he'd come up.
Like he could play in a conference championship game at USC without ever having to play Oregon.
Correct. And if you're winning the South every year, I think they're pretty happy because you're gonna win the league championship every once in a while if you're doing that. So yeah, I think that's why that name keeps coming up. Matt Campbell, obviously somebody you should consider, but from what I've heard, Matt Campbell does not want to go. If he does go somewhere, he doesn't want to go to the SEC because he doesn't want that style of recruiting. I would say he wouldn't like it at USC if that's his feeling, because you have to recruit like a good SEC coach at USC to get them what they want.
Well, especially because the SEC is in LA. It's like,
correct.
I don't know how much the SEC is recruiting the same areas that Iowa State. Iowa State recruits the Midwest. They're a Big 12 team, but I think mostly speaking are either in Texas or in the Midwest. And it's like Texas obviously is very highly populated by SEC programs, but it's like not so much in Ohio or Indiana or the other Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska, those types of areas. And of course, if there's a top 100 player, doesn't matter if they're on Mars, the SEC is going to show up. But the entire thing of like, if Corey Foreman is in next year's class, whoever takes the job has to be able to keep Corey Foreman away from Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. Like, it's like, right. Even if you're not in that conference, you still have to win those battles, for sure.
Yeah, and that's why Cristobal's name comes up for the same reason, because we know he can recruit like that. But if I'm Mario Cristobal, I stay at Oregon because I'm already 2 or 3 years ahead of USC. And even if they hire somebody good, you're still going to get yours. You're still going to win a lot. And then if you're waiting for something perfect closer to where you're from, which is Florida, then maybe you wait. And maybe it's, Alabama opens when Nick Saban retires, or Dan Mullen goes to the NFL and Florida opens, or maybe you want to go back home to Miami sometime. I don't know if Miami's definitely not a better job than Oregon right now, but you just never know. If I'm Mario Cristobal, I stay at Oregon until the perfect situation comes along because he's already got it rolling.
I think that if you're Mario Cristobal, you've already proven that you can recruit at a high level. I think that, you would make, I know they just beat Ohio State very convincingly, but overall his resume, it doesn't indicate elite level coach. I think it indicates elite level recruiter. Now, obviously, being an elite level recruiter helps you get the second notch, and he might be on his way this year. But he strikes me as somebody who could exist in that realm. whether it be in
Yes.
Florida or in California. But he's already going into California and taking top-tier talents away from SC.
And if SC gets a bunch of players, it's still not going to keep Oregon from getting players. There's enough to go around between those two. So I don't think he needs to worry about that much. And if he wants to stay at Oregon forever, because he's got a situation now where if he can build a roster that can go to Columbus and beat Ohio State, you can win anywhere. You don't need to do anything.
And
you don't need to go anywhere else.
Oregon, their roster is not complete yet. The class they signed,
he did it without his two best players.
Their two best players weren't on the field. And Ohio State was completely, in my opinion, got their butts kicked despite having a distinct talent advantage. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Oregon looks like in 2 or 3 years when they're at full speed.
All right. Well, let's talk about some other folks. Fickell's an interesting one because Mike Bone, the AD at USC, hired Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. I don't think Fickell leaves for that, only because he seems to, be firmly rooted until the perfect situation, and by that I mean Ohio State or Notre Dame, comes along. He's got 6 kids. You try to uproot 6 kids. And then the other piece of that is he's been Ohio State's head coach. And I think people forget how much that changes the dynamics for him. He's already had one of these jobs. It didn't go well, and he was thrown into a horrible situation. You can't blame him for that year. But I talked to him about this last year. It affected him so much that he didn't even know if he ever wanted to be a head coach at that point. He was just perfectly fine coaching his position. And it took, I believe it was a conversation with Mark D'Antonio, who said, look, you could be really good at this. You got to try. And, so I think for him, if he's got things in a place where he feels good and he likes his team and he likes where he is, you're going to have to dynamite him out of there. And even USC might not be enough dynamite.
I was there when he was the interim head coach on the beat.
Yep.
So I saw it all happen. It was an impossible situation. And the thing that people forget about it was Ohio State also lost their 6 best players.
Yes, including their
So
quarterback.
it wasn't just like Jim Tressel just resigned, Tatgate was happening. It's like he got thrown into a position where they were just in a really bad spot. And it was one of the only losing seasons they've had. I think it's one of 2 losing seasons they've had since 2000. So that might only be the only one, if I'm not mistaken. So, I get that would be something that would cause apprehension. Now, here's the thing I will say about Luke Fickell. There's 2 things that I would be afraid of. One, the transition from AAC to Power 5 hasn't gone very well with the last few.
But you're saying as a recruiter, was Luke Fickell not an excellent recruiter at Ohio State?
Well, let me get to the next part then.
Okay.
Luke Fickell's strength, and it was at Ohio State, and I don't know if people listening to this podcast know who Darren Lee is or remember. Darren Lee was a first-round linebacker off of Ohio State's national championship team. He was a 3-star quarterback in high school. What Luke Fickell did while he was Ohio State's defensive coordinator was go into Ohio, into the under-recruited areas, and do everything that he could to find the undervalued guys who weren't getting scholarship offers, and he would go into Urban Meyer's office and convince them to take these kids. And these kids would turn out to be first-round draft picks. And nobody knows the state of Ohio better than Luke Fickell does. Having, spent the majority of his entire life in Columbus, both in high school as a football player and then as a longtime coach, but then also now recruiting from the Cincinnati area, the guy knows the state very well. He's in a comfort zone. He's in a conference that promotes that type of roster. And it's like, just because you're a super good recruiter in Ohio that has the phone number of every single coach and assistant coach in the high school ranks in your entire state, then plucking that person out of Cincinnati and out of their comfort zone and then dropping them into LA is a little bit different. So it's just like the AAC promotes success if you know your surrounding areas and are a very good recruiter and can have success within that strategy. And then on top of that, he's also doing it in a state that he's known his entire life and can recruit the heck out of. So it's like that would be, I'm not saying he wouldn't be successful, but it would be a major transition. And it kind of reminds me of Sonny Dykes. Sonny Dykes
Going to Cal.
couldn't. He's a great coach. No idea how to recruit Northern California. He'll tell you that to this day. Comes back to SMU, and now they're knocking off top 100 players in the Dallas area. And it's like sometimes territory and comfort in that territory is all that it takes in order to recruit at a high level. And it just would be a very big challenge, and I don't know if it's a 100% lock that he would go kill it out there. And I think he knows that too.